Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's story is one of the most shocking betrayals you'll ever hear. Imagine opening your home to help someone, only for them to stab you in the back in the worst way possible. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now let's get into it. Part 1. A home turned upside down. I never thought I'd be in this situation. But here I am, sitting in my room, while my husband's entire family is gathered downstairs. Most likely talking about me like I'm the villain. I'm 31F, and I've been married to David, 32M, for 8 years. 2 months ago, I suffered my third miscarriage at 31 weeks. I can't even begin to describe the pain of losing a child that late in pregnancy. But this story is not just about that. It's about betrayal. 4 months ago, David's younger sister, Amanda, 21F, showed up at our door in tears. She was pregnant, and her boyfriend wanted nothing to do with it. With nowhere else to go, she turned to us. I didn't hesitate. I welcomed her in. I comforted her. We binge-watched shows together, ate way too much ice cream, and I thought we were bonding. I thought she saw me as family. I was wrong. Part 2. A guest or a queen? First, things were fine. She was understandably emotional, and I did my best to support her. But soon, Amanda started taking over my home. She never cleaned up after herself. Clothes on the floor, dirty dishes everywhere. She even left personal items, things that should never be out in public, on my living room table. I tried talking to her gently. I wasn't even angry, I just wanted to set some basic boundaries. She immediately burst into tears and promised to do better. She didn't. Instead, she made things worse. Amanda expected me to do everything for her. Her laundry, her dishes, even cleaning her room. Her excuse? I'm pregnant. You should take care of me. I held my tongue. I tried to stay calm. But after everything I'd just been through, the last thing I wanted to do was play maid in my own home. I went to David for support. His response? Honey, she's going through a lot. We should be helping her out. Maybe taking care of her will make you feel better. Make me feel better? I was speechless. Was letting her stay in my house rent-free not enough? Was taking care of her emotionally not enough? What about me? But I swallowed my anger and let it go, until she crossed the final line. Part 3, the final straw. One thing that brought me any kind of comfort after my miscarriage was one particular food. Sounds silly, I know. But when you lose something that big, you cling to anything that makes you feel normal. So I went out and bought it. Wrote my name on it. Told Amanda, please don't eat this. And what did she do? She ate it. I saw the empty container in the trash. I confronted her. She shrugged. It's just food. I was craving it. I turned to David. Surely he would see my side this time. But no. She's pregnant. You need to stop being so selfish. Selfish? That was the moment I realized something. I wasn't just dealing with Amanda. I was dealing with two people who saw me as nothing but an afterthought. Part 4. The ultimate betrayal. I decided I would distance myself. I'd tolerate Amanda's presence, but I wouldn't go out of my way to engage. Then came the baby shower. She planned it at my house. Without asking. I didn't even know if I could emotionally handle being there. But David pushed me. This is important. You need to show up. Otherwise, it'll ruin your relationship with my family. Fine. I went. And that's when I found out what they had done. Amanda had taken over my baby's nursery. The one I had spent months setting up. The room I had been preparing for my child. I stood in shock as guests admired the setup. My setup. For my baby. I lost it. I turned to Amanda. How dare you? She rolled her eyes. It's not my fault you couldn't have a baby. Why let it go to waste? The words hit me like a brick. David tried to calm me down. I turned to him, shaking. Pick. He blinked. What? Pick. Me or her? He froze. And in that moment I knew. Part 5, the aftermath begins. I stormed upstairs, slamming the door. The entire family was whispering about me. I sat on my bed, shaking with rage, realizing that I had lost everything. Not just my baby, but my husband, my home, my sense of safety. And now, I have a choice to make. Do I fight for my marriage? Or do I walk away and start over? Because one thing is clear. I can't stay here anymore. Part 6. The breaking point. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, feeling my whole world unravel. Downstairs, I could still hear them. David's family whispering, Amanda playing the victim. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them everything. But instead, I did something better. I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. My mother. Part 7. A voice of reason. She answered on the second ring. Sweetheart. The second I heard her voice, the dam broke. I sobbed, unable to form words. She didn't ask questions. She didn't push. She just listened. Until finally, I managed to choke out, I can't stay here. Her voice turned sharp. What happened? I told her everything. The nursery, the baby shower, Amanda's words, the way David refused to stand up for me. By the time I was done, my mother was silent. Then she spoke. You're leaving. Tonight. Part 8. Packing up the past. She was right. I couldn't waste another second in this house. I grabbed a suitcase and started packing, only the essentials. David's footsteps echoed in the hallway. I ignored them. He knocked once, then again. Then he just walked in. What are you doing? I zipped up my suitcase. Leaving. His face fell. What? No. You can't just. I turned to him, eyes blazing. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Part 9. The final goodbye? David stood there, stunned. You're overreacting. I laughed. Overreacting? David, your sister took over my baby's room. She insulted me. She treated me like a maid. And you let her. His mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing to say. I walked past him, suitcase in hand. Amanda stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed, smirking. You're really leaving? She taunted. I met her gaze, my voice dead calm. You're going to regret this. Then, without another word, I walked out the door. Part 10. A new beginning? Or the start of a war? I drove to my mother's house that night. She was waiting outside, arms open, just like when I was a child. The second I stepped out of the car, she held me. And for the first time in months, I felt safe. But this isn't over. Because David, he started calling, begging. And Amanda, she's not done yet. I can feel it. And I won't go down without a fight. Part 11. The message that changed everything. The calls didn't stop. First it was David, then his mother, then his father, and finally Amanda herself. I let them all go to voicemail, until one message stopped me cold. It was from David. His voice was shaky, desperate. You need to come back. Now. I almost laughed, until he said the next part. Amanda's gone, and I think she took something of yours. Part 12. What did she take? My blood ran cold. Gone? What did that even mean? I called him back, my voice sharp. What do you mean she's gone? David exhaled shakily. She left in the middle of the night. No note, no explanation. Just gone. I frowned. And what do you mean she took something of mine? There was a long silence. Then his voice dropped. The nursery. Some of the baby's things. They're missing. Part 13. Following the trail. I didn't want to go back. But this wasn't about David anymore. It was about me. About my child. About everything Amanda stole from me. So I drove back. Heart pounding. Mind racing. I wasn't sure what I expected. But I knew one thing. Amanda had taken too much from me already. And I wasn't about to let her take one more thing. Part 14. The House of Lies. The second I walked through that door, I felt it. Something was off. David was pacing the living room. He looked exhausted. Where is she? I demanded. He shook his head. I don't know. But she left this. He handed me a note. My breath hitched as I read the words. You don't deserve what you lost. So I'm taking it. Part 15. The search begins. I staggered back, hands trembling. What does that mean? I whispered. David ran a hand through his hair. I don't know, but I think I found something. He led me to the nursery. The crib? Gone. The baby clothes? Gone. And the one thing that shattered me the most? The sonogram photo I had framed on the dresser? Gone. Amanda had taken it. Part 16, the first clue. I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't just about Amanda being cruel. This was something else. She wanted to hurt me, to break me, and I refused to let her win. David cleared his throat. I think I know where she went. I turned to him, my voice dead calm. Then let's go get her. Part 17, the chase begins. David hesitated. There's this house. A place she used to go when she needed to be alone. I narrowed my eyes. What house? He sighed. Our grandparents' old cabin. Out by the lake. A chill ran down my spine. I had been there once. Years ago. It was abandoned. No electricity. No cell service. Just miles of woods and a single road leading in. If Amanda was there, she didn't want to be found. Part 18, the drive into darkness. The drive was long. Too long. David sat in silence beside me. Every mile we got closer, my stomach twisted tighter. Finally, we turned down the narrow dirt road. The trees closed in around us, swallowing the car in darkness. And then, through the trees I saw it. The cabin. Lights flickering inside. She was here. Part 19, the confrontation. I killed the engine. David put a hand on my arm. Maybe we should wait. I was already out of the car, marching toward the door. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the door open. And there she was, sitting in an old chair, rocking back and forth, holding the sonogram picture in her hands, and humming a lullaby. Part 20. Amanda's delusion. She looked up at me and smiled. You finally made it. I clenched my fists. Where is it? She cocked her head. Where's what? I stepped forward. The crib. The clothes. Everything you stole from me. Amanda's smile didn't fade. I didn't steal anything. She lifted the sonogram. I'm just taking care of what's left. Part 21, the broken mind. David stepped inside behind me, his voice soft. Amanda, this isn't right. Her eyes flicked to him. No, what's not right is that she gave up. Her gaze swung back to me. That's why you don't deserve this. You just walked away. My blood boiled. You have no idea what I've been through. Amanda stood slowly, still holding the picture. I know enough. I know you couldn't handle it. So now, her voice dropped to a whisper. I will. Part 22. The terrifying realization. A sick feeling crawled through me. Amanda was delusional. She wasn't just being cruel. She believed this. She had convinced herself that my loss was her gain. I glanced around the room. That's when I saw it. The crib. Set up in the corner. The blankets folded perfectly. Stuffed animals lined up in a neat little row. Like she was waiting for something. Or someone. My stomach turned. This wasn't just stealing. This was something much, much worse. Part 23. The desperate plea. David must have seen it too. His voice shook. Amanda, you need help. She blinked. No. I need a baby. Silence. Then she laughed. Soft. Almost dreamy. It's funny, really, she said. I thought I was the broken one. But maybe you're the ones who don't see the truth. I forced myself to stay calm. Stay focused. Amanda, listen to me. I took a slow step forward. This isn't real. She stiffened. Her fingers tightened around the sonogram. You don't get to say that. Her voice was cold. You don't get to take this away from me too. Part 24. A dangerous delusion. Amanda's grip on the sonogram tightened. Her breathing was shaky, uneven. I won't let you ruin this. Her voice was soft. But there was something in it. Something dark. David moved closer to me, lowering his voice. This isn't safe, he whispered. But I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I had to get through to her. Before it was too late. Part 25. The ticking clock. I kept my voice steady. Amanda, listen to me. I gestured toward the crib. This isn't real. This isn't yours. Her face twitched. You don't get to say that. Her voice cracked. I did everything right. I waited. I sacrificed. And what did I get? Her eyes burned into mine. Nothing. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just grief. This was something else. Something unhinged. Part 26. The breaking point. I took a cautious step forward. Amanda! She snapped. Don't! She screamed. I froze. She was shaking. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes were wild. I deserved this, she whispered. I was meant to have this. David's voice was low. Put the sonogram down, Amanda. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't let go. She just shook her head. And then, she laughed. Part 27. The nightmare unfolds. Her laugh was wrong. Not relief. Not amusement. It was broken, like a woman who had finally lost her grip on reality. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper, she said, I think it's time for you to leave. David tensed beside me. Amanda took a step toward the crib. Her eyes darkened. You don't belong here. That's when I saw it. The glint of something metal, peeking out from under the crib. A knife. Part 28. A dangerous decision. I kept my expression calm. But inside, panic clawed at my chest. David saw it too. I could feel him tense beside me. We had seconds to decide. Stay and try to talk her down? Or walk away while we still could? I met David's gaze. He nodded once. We both knew. This wasn't just obsession anymore. This was danger. I took a slow breath. And then, without breaking eye contact, I reached for my phone. Because this was no longer a conversation. This was a ticking bomb. And it was about to explode. Part 29. The moment of no return. My fingers hovered over my phone. David shifted beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. Call someone. Now. Amanda's grip on the sonogram tightened. Her knuckles were white. Her breath came in shaky gasps. Then her gaze snapped to my phone. You think I don't see what you're doing? Her voice was eerily calm. Too calm. David stiffened. I kept my tone even. Amanda, we just want to talk. Her lips curled into a smirk. No. You want to take this from me. She stepped closer to the crib. Her fingers brushed against the blanket. Possessive gesture. A warning. Then, in a voice that sent ice through my veins, she whispered, I won't let you. Part 30. The thin line between reality and delusion. My heart was pounding. Amanda's entire body was tense. Her world had fractured. And now, she was willing to fight for the lie. David's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. Amanda, listen to me. No one is trying to take anything from you. Her head tilted, like she was trying to decide if she believed him. For a moment, I thought she might, but then, she reached under the crib. Her fingers closed around the handle of the knife. Slow, deliberate. David's entire body went rigid. I froze. Amanda's eyes were hollow. You don't understand, she whispered. Her fingers trembled on the blade. And then, she lifted it. Part 31. A dangerous standoff. David and I didn't move. Amanda held the knife at her side, her breathing ragged. I lost everything, she whispered. Her gaze flickered to the crib. You don't get to take this too. I took a slow step forward, my hands raised. No one is taking anything, I said softly. Her grip on the knife tightened. You're lying. She shook her head violently. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't lower the blade. David clenched his fists. I could feel the tension crackling in the air. This was it. One wrong move, and this could turn deadly. Part 32. The breaking point. A single tear slipped down Amanda's cheek. Her voice cracked. I just wanted a chance, she whispered. She wasn't looking at us anymore. She was staring at the empty crib, like she was seeing something we couldn't. David's voice was careful, measured. Amanda, put the knife down. She flinched, a flicker of hesitation. For a brief second I thought she might listen. But then, she clutched the knife tighter, and whispered, I can't. Part 33. The moment that changed everything. Amanda's fingers trembled on the knife handle. David didn't blink. Neither did I. The air was so thick with tension it felt suffocating. I had seconds, maybe less, to say the right thing. To stop this from turning into something we couldn't take back. Amanda's gaze flickered between me and David, her breath ragged. Then her lips parted. "You don't understand what it's like," she whispered. Her voice was small, a broken version of the woman I once knew. "I do understand, Amanda," I said. My tone as steady as I could manage. Her eyes darkened. "No, you don't." Then she lifted the knife higher. David took an instinctive step forward. Amanda flinched back. "Stay away," she snapped. The knife gleamed under the dim nursery light. And suddenly, I realized something. She wasn't threatening us. She was threatening herself. Part 34. The Edge of Madness. David must have realized it too. His posture shifted. Less defensive. More careful. "Amanda," he said, softer now. "You don't have to do this." Her grip on the knife was tight. Her shoulders shook. "This is all I have left," she murmured. My stomach twisted. The way she stared at that empty crib. The way her free hand reached for the blanket. She was drowning, and I didn't know if I could pull her back. I took a step forward, slowly. "If this is all you have left, Amanda," I said gently, "then let us help you. Let us fix this." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Fix this?" she echoed. Her fingers twitched on the knife. "You can't fix what's already broken." Part 35. The Final Plea. David took another small step forward. "Amanda," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Look at me." She did. "Whatever you're feeling right now, it doesn't have to end this way." Amanda's breathing was shaky. Her eyes were glistening. For the first time in this twisted nightmare, she looked lost. "Then tell me," she whispered. "What do I do?" David glanced at me. I met his gaze. We both knew. This was our chance. Part 36. The choice that would define everything. "Let go of the knife, Amanda," I said softly. She hesitated. Her grip tightened, then loosened. My heart pounded. Was she finally? Bang. The front door slammed open. Amanda jerked. Her breath hitched, and before I could stop her, the knife fell from her hands, but not before slicing across her own arm. Part 37. A desperate race against time. Blood spilled onto the nursery floor. Amanda let out a sharp gasp, her face paling. David lunged forward, catching her before she collapsed. "Call 911, he barked at me. I didn't hesitate. My hands shook as I dialed. Amanda was slipping. Her eyes fluttered. Her lips parted. I could barely hear her next words, but when I did, a chill ran down my spine. It was never supposed to be like this. Part 38. The truth Amanda never meant to say. Sirens wailed in the distance. David pressed down on her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. I crouched beside them, my mind racing. What wasn't supposed to be like this? I demanded. Amanda's breath hitched. Her eyes flickered between me, the crib, and David. Then she smiled. A sad, knowing smile. I wasn't supposed to be the only one losing everything. David froze. I felt my stomach drop. "What does that mean, Amanda?" I pressed. She let out a weak, breathless laugh. Then, just before the paramedics stormed in, she whispered, "You'll see." Part 39. The words that haunt me. Amanda's whisper echoed in my head. "You'll see." The paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing her as they rushed her out. David and I, we just stood there, frozen. The sound of sirens faded into the night, but my heart kept pounding. David exhaled, rubbing his face. "She was out of her mind," he muttered. "She didn't know what she was saying." I wanted to believe that, but something deep in my gut told me. Amanda meant every word. Part 40. A chilling discovery. We followed the ambulance to the hospital, but Amanda was unconscious by the time we got there. The doctors said she would recover, that she lost a lot of blood, but she would be okay. But I couldn't shake the feeling. This wasn't over. So while David spoke with the doctors, I made a choice. I turned on my phone, scrolled through my saved security footage. And then, I found something that made my blood run cold. Part 41. The footage that changed everything. The night before the baby shower. Amanda was in the nursery, alone. I watched, my fingers tightening around the phone as the footage played. She wasn't setting anything up. She wasn't decorating. She was digging. My pulse spiked. She moved something under the crib. Something small. Then, she whispered something. I turned up the volume. Static. Then, they'll never find out. My entire body went cold. Part 42. What was she hiding? I shoved the phone into my pocket, my hands shaking. David turned to me. What is it? He asked, frowning. I hesitated. How could I tell him? That Amanda had been sneaking into the nursery before she ever moved in? That she had hid something under my crib? That this wasn't just about her being a manipulative guest. It was something bigger. Something I wasn't ready to face. Part 43. The return to the nursery. Couldn't sleep that night. David passed out on the couch, exhaustion taking over. But me, I needed answers. So at 2 a.m., I crept up the stairs. Slow, quiet. The nursery door stood slightly ajar, just like Amanda had left it. I stepped inside, my breath shallow. The crib. That's where she had hidden something. I knelt down, moved my hands across the floorboards. And then, I felt it. A loose plank. My heart pounded. I pried it open. And what I found made me wish I had never looked. Part 44. What Amanda left behind. My fingers trembled as I pried open the loose floorboard. A small, black velvet pouch sat in the darkness beneath the crib. It was old, the fabric slightly torn, the drawstrings frayed. I swallowed hard. Whatever was inside, Amanda had hidden it for a reason. My gut screamed at me to stop, to put it back, to pretend I never found it. But my hands moved on their own. Slowly, carefully, I pulled the pouch open, and what I saw inside made my blood run ice cold. Part 45. The key to the past. Inside the pouch were two things. A small silver key, and a folded photograph. I hesitated. My hands felt clammy as I unfolded the paper. The image was faded, but the faces were clear. It was a family photo. A much younger Amanda stood in the middle, no more than 10 years old. To her right was a woman. She had Amanda's eyes. Her mother? To the left, a man. Tall, dark hair, expression unreadable. But something was off. Because the man's face, it looked eerily familiar. I turned the photo over. There was something written on the back. 3 words. It was him. My hands tightened. Who was him? And why did Amanda hide this picture under my baby's crib? Part 46. A secret in plain sight. The key in my hand felt heavy. What did it unlock? A box? A door? Something Amanda never wanted found? I turned the key over, looking for a marking. And then, I saw it. A tiny engraving. 3 numbers. A storage unit. I exhaled sharply, my mind racing. Amanda had been hiding something for years. And now I had the key. But did I really want to know the truth? Part 47. The late night drive. I waited until David was asleep. Until the house was silent. Then, I grabbed my keys and drove. The storage facility wasn't far, just 20 minutes outside of town. As I pulled in, the place was deserted. Dim security lights flickered overhead. I checked the numbers on the key again. Unit 317. Row after row of metal doors stretched in front of me. And there it was. 317. I stepped closer. My breath felt shaky. I slipped the key into the lock. Turned smoothly. The door creaked open. And inside was something I never could have expected. Part 48. The truth no one was supposed to find. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Shelves lined the walls. Boxes, old furniture, stacks of papers. It looked like someone's life had been packed away and abandoned. But then my eyes landed on something else. Something that made my stomach drop. A baby's bassinet, covered in dust. sitting in the corner like it had been forgotten. I took a step closer, my pulse hammering. Inside the bassinet, a stuffed rabbit, the same one Amanda used to carry around as a kid. I turned to the shelves. There were more boxes. I opened the first one, and what I saw inside made me stumble backward. Part 49. The files that shouldn't exist. Inside the box were files. Old police reports, medical records, photos, so many photos. I flipped through them, my hands shaking. And then, I saw a name I recognized instantly. David. I froze. Why was my husband's name in Amanda's secret storage unit? I dug deeper. More files. More reports. And then I saw it. A birth certificate. Not Amanda's. Someone else's. A name I didn't know. A name that changed everything. Part 50. The unbelievable connection. The name on the certificate was Eleanor Carter. Born 23 years ago. The mother's name? Amanda's mom. The father? Unknown. My head spun. I read the papers again. Eleanor Carter. I didn't know the name. Or at least I thought I didn't. Then my eyes landed on another document. An adoption record. And my entire body went numb. Because the name listed under adoptive parents was David's parents. My husband's family. And suddenly everything made sense. Amanda wasn't just hiding a secret. She was hiding a person. A missing sister. A child no one ever talked about. And now, I had proof. Part 51. The name that shouldn't exist. I sat in the car, gripping the papers so tightly they crumpled in my hands. Eleanor Carter. A name I had never heard before. A person who, according to these files, shouldn't exist. My hands were clammy. My chest tightened. Why had David's family hidden this? Why had Amanda kept it a secret? And why was I just finding out about it now? My pulse pounded as I flipped through the rest of the documents. There were letters. Some typed. Some handwritten. All addressed to the same person. To Eleanor, wherever you are. Amanda had been trying to find her. And now that job had fallen on me. Part 52. The clue I almost missed. I couldn't bring myself to drive home. Instead, I sat in the dark parking lot of the storage facility, scanning the papers for anything, any detail that made sense. Then I found it. A letter, separate from the others. Amanda's handwriting was shaky, like she had written it in a hurry. I know the truth now. I know what they did to her. And if they find out, I know. If something happens to me, please don't let them bury this. Eleanor is still out there. You have to find her before they do. My breath hitched. Before who does? And why was Amanda so afraid? Part 53. The night call. I knew I had to get home. But as I reached for my keys, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Silence. Then, a distorted voice crackled through the speaker. Stop digging. My entire body froze. The call ended. I stared at my screen. Blocked number. No way to call back. Someone knew. Someone was watching me. And that meant Amanda had been right. I was in danger. Part 54. A lie unraveling. I raced home, my heart in my throat. David was awake when I walked through the door. His eyes flickered toward the clock. Where were you? He asked, his voice steady, but too steady. Couldn't tell him. Not yet. I went for a drive. I lied. Needed some air. He didn't blink. Did he already know? I forced a smile, but my stomach twisted. I needed to act normal. Because if David was hiding something, then I was sleeping next to a man I couldn't trust. Part 55. The unexpected visitor. The next morning I barely slept. I kept replaying the phone call in my head. Was it a threat? A warning? I had too many questions. But then, just as I was pouring my coffee, the doorbell rang. I frowned. David was in the shower. We weren't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I nearly dropped my mug. A woman stood there. Her face was pale, her eyes haunted. And she looked exactly like Amanda. A chill crawled up my spine. Who are you? I whispered. She exhaled shakily. My name is Eleanor. Part 56. The truth comes crashing down. I staggered back. Eleanor. The woman Amanda had spent years trying to find. The woman who, according to every record I'd ever seen, was never supposed to exist. She looked just as shaken as I felt. You know who I am?" she asked cautiously. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I whispered. "But I don't understand. I thought. I know." She cut me off. "That's why I'm here." She hesitated. "Then, they lied to you about everything." My hands tightened on the doorframe. I felt like the ground beneath me was about to crack open. And as she stepped inside, I knew whatever she was about to tell me would change everything. Part 57. The woman who wasn't supposed to exist. Eleanor stepped inside, her movements hesitant, as if she expected me to slam the door in her face at any moment. I barely noticed my own breathing. This woman, this ghost from Amanda's past, was real. I motioned for her to sit, but she shook her head. "There's no time for that," she said. "They know I'm here." My stomach tightened. "Who?" She swallowed hard. "The same people who were watching Amanda," she whispered. "The same people who are watching you now." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had barely processed that she was even real. Now I had to process the fact that someone might be tracking both of us. And if she was right, I might not have much time to figure out why. Part 58. The connection I never saw. I forced myself to focus. Amanda's letter. The hidden storage unit. The unknown caller. Eleanor. "How do you know Amanda?" I asked. Eleanor sighed, rubbing her arms like she was trying to shake off a chill. "Because," she whispered, "she was my sister." I stopped breathing. No, that wasn't possible. Amanda had no family left. She told me that herself. Or at least, that's what I had been led to believe. I shook my head, gripping the edge of the counter. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "She told me her family was gone, that she was alone." Eleanor gave a bitter laugh. "That's because she had to say that," she said. "Because if anyone found out she was looking for me." She trailed off, her lips pressing together. I swallowed hard. "If anyone found out what?" Eleanor's gaze locked onto mine. "They would have killed her." Part 59. A deadly secret. My hands felt numb. This had gone from complicated to dangerous in an instant. Eleanor glanced around the room, lowering her voice. "They tried to erase me," she whispered. "Years ago. I didn't know if I could handle another bombshell." But she kept going. "They changed my records, buried my existence." Amanda was the only one who still believed I was alive. Couldn't wrap my mind around it. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated. Then, "The same people who made Amanda disappear." My blood turned to ice. Amanda didn't just die. She was taken. Part 60. The file I missed. I stumbled back, trying to process. Eleanor wasn't lying. Her eyes held too much pain, too much truth. But if Amanda had been taken, why had I never questioned it? I thought back to the files. Had I missed something? A date? A report? A clue? And then it hit me. I had missed something. The coroner's report. I had glanced at it, skimmed it in my rush to absorb everything. But now I remembered something strange. No cause of death. Just accidental circumstances. Like someone had been hiding something. Part 61. The warning. Eleanor leaned forward. "You don't have to believe me," she said. "But if you don't start questioning things, you'll end up like Amanda." I felt sick. I had spent months grieving her, thinking I had lost her to a tragedy. But now I had to consider the possibility that her death wasn't an accident at all. That she had been hunted. And if that was true, then whoever killed her might be coming for me next. Part 62. The escape plan. Eleanor exhaled sharply. "We don't have much time," she said. "They're probably watching you already." I looked toward the window instinctively. Nothing. But that didn't mean we were safe. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Her expression was grim. "You need to disappear." I blinked. "What?" She nodded. "If you want to stay alive, you can't stay here," she said. You can't stay in this life. My heart pounded. I had a job, a home, a life. But now, I wasn't sure if I'd live long enough to keep it. And for the first time since Amanda's death, I was afraid. Part 63. A door that shouldn't have been open. Eleanor's words lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. You need to disappear. I wanted to argue, tell her that running wasn't an option. But before I could respond, a sound cut through the silence. A creak. From down the hall. Eleanor's eyes snapped toward mine. You expecting someone? She whispered. I shook my head. Then another creak. My blood ran cold. Someone was in my house. Part 64. The shadow in the hall. We moved quietly. Eleanor pressed against the wall, her breathing shallow, her hand slowly reaching for something beneath her jacket. A weapon. I didn't have time to ask. Because when I turned the corner, the front door was open. Not wide open, just cracked. Like someone had slipped inside. Or worse, was still here. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Stay here, I whispered. Eleanor grabbed my wrist. No, she whispered back. You don't know what you're walking into. But I had to look. I had to know. Part 65. A warning left behind. I stepped into the living room. My eyes scanned the space. The furniture untouched. The kitchen normal. But then, my gaze landed on the coffee table. A single object. Something that hadn't been there before. A manila envelope. I hesitated. Then slowly I picked it up. Inside, a photo. And the moment I saw it, my hands shook. It was a picture of me and Amanda, taken from a distance. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the message scrawled in red ink across the top. You were never supposed to find out. Part 66. The list. Eleanor cursed under her breath. I turned to her, my voice unsteady. This was meant for me. She nodded, lips pressed tight. I pulled out the rest of the papers from the envelope. More photos, more surveillance. But then, at the very bottom, a list. Names. Amanda's was at the top. And just below it, my stomach twisted. This wasn't just about Amanda anymore. I was on someone's list. And if she was already gone, that meant I was next. Part 67. Nowhere is safe. I grabbed my keys, my mind racing. We have to go, I said. Eleanor nodded, already moving toward the door. But the moment I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed. I hesitated. An unknown number. I stared at it. Then, against every instinct, I answered. Silence. Then, a voice. Low, cold, too familiar. You should have left it alone. My pulse spiked. And then, the line went dead. Part 68. The chase begins. I turned to Eleanor. We're not running. She exhaled sharply. You're not listening. No. I cut her off. I'm done running. If they want to come after me, fine. I held up the envelope. But I'm going after them first. Eleanor studied me for a moment. Then slowly she nodded. Then let's finish what Amanda started. Because now, it wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about surviving it. Part 69. A name that shouldn't exist. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel as we sped down the darkened streets. The envelope sat open between us, the names still burning in my mind. Amanda, mine, and below that a name I didn't recognize. Does this mean anything to you? I asked, holding up the paper. Eleanor glanced at it, her jaw tightening. Yeah, she muttered. I waited. Then finally she spoke. That name, Darren Cole, he was a journalist. I frowned. Was? She exhaled. He disappeared 6 months ago. No body, no clues, just gone. A chill ran down my spine. And now, his name was on the same list as mine. Part 70. The last known location. Eleanor pulled up to a gas station on the outskirts of town. Why are we stopping? I asked. She turned to me, serious. You want to figure this out? Then we need to follow the last lead Amanda was working on. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. Amanda mentioned something before she vanished. A meeting she had with Darren Cole. I clenched my fists. And where was that? Eleanor met my gaze. A cabin. 2 hours north of here. I hesitated. A secluded location. A dead journalist. And Amanda had gone there right before she disappeared. It was a setup. I knew it. Eleanor knew it. But we were going anyway. Part 71. A cabin in the woods. The drive felt like a lifetime. Every mile deeper into the forest made me feel like we were being swallowed whole. Finally, Eleanor pulled onto a dirt path. No lights. No signs of life. Just trees. And at the end of the road, a cabin. Run down. Abandoned. But someone had been here recently. The door was ajar. Eleanor reached for her gun. "Stay close," she whispered. I nodded. And then, together, we stepped inside. Part 72. The room no one should have seen. The cabin smelled of rotting wood and dust. But the moment we stepped inside, I felt it. That uneasy feeling. Like someone was watching. Eleanor moved ahead, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. I followed, my breath tight in my chest. Then we found it. A room in the back. Bare. Except for one thing. A board covered in photos. And not just random ones. Photos of Amanda. Of Darren Cole. Of me. Pinned up like a twisted investigation. Eleanor exhaled sharply. "This wasn't just some meeting spot," she whispered. I swallowed hard. This was a hunting ground. Part 73. The footsteps outside. Then we heard it. A crunch. Outside. Eleanor froze. My blood ran cold. We weren't alone. I glanced at the door, still open. A shadow moved just beyond the trees. Slow. Deliberate. Like whoever was out there wanted us to know. Eleanor silently pulled out her gun. I backed toward the wall, my heartbeat pounding. Then the footsteps stopped. Right at the doorstep. And then, a voice. Low. Calm. Too familiar. "You shouldn't have come here." I clenched my fists. Because I knew that voice. And now, I was finally face to face with the person who started it all. Part 74. The man in the shadows. The voice sent a shockwave through my system. Eleanor raised her gun, her stance solid. Step into the light. Silence. Then a slow shuffle of footsteps. And finally he appeared. A tall, wiry man, late 40s, with deep-set eyes and a face that looked like it had seen too many years of regret. But what hit me hardest? I knew him. Not personally. But I had seen his face before. Somewhere in the past. Somewhere I couldn't quite place. He stood there, hands in his pockets, unbothered by Eleanor's gun. "You should have stayed away, Ethan." My stomach turned. "How do you know my name?" He let out a small, bitter chuckle. "You don't remember me, do you?" I took a step forward. "Who the hell are you?" He finally exhaled, then muttered a name that sent a chill through me. Darren Cole. Part 75. A dead man stands before us. Eleanor's grip on her gun tightened. I stared at the man, my pulse hammering. That's impossible. Darren Cole had been missing for 6 months. Declared dead. And yet, he was standing right in front of me. Eleanor kept her gun raised. "We saw the reports. You vanished." Darren smirked. "I did. And I stayed gone until now." I swallowed hard. "Why?" He sighed, looking around the cabin. "This place," he muttered, running a hand over the photos on the board. "This was where it all started." I glanced at Eleanor, then back at Darren. "What do you mean?" Darren turned, locking eyes with me. "This wasn't just my story, Ethan. This was Amanda's too. And now," his voice lowered, "it's yours." Part 76. The truth about Amanda. Eleanor shot me a look. He's playing us. But something in Darren's face told me he wasn't. He looked haunted. I took a slow breath. "Tell me everything." Darren hesitated. Then finally he nodded. "It started with Amanda," he admitted. "She found something she wasn't supposed to. Something that got me killed, or at least, that's what they wanted everyone to think." Eleanor crossed her arms. "Who is they?" Darren clenched his jaw. "The people Amanda was investigating. The ones who made her disappear." My fists tightened. And now? I asked. Darren exhaled. Now they're coming for you. Part 77. A name that changes everything. I shook my head. Why me? I wasn't involved in Amanda's work. Darren's face darkened. That's where you're wrong. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to me. I hesitated before opening it. And when I did, my world tilted. Because right there, in bold letters, was a name I never expected. A name that made everything click. A name that shouldn't have been there. Eleanor gasped. Oh my God. Darren nodded. Because that name? It was mine. Part 78. The target on my back. I barely breathed. My name was on a hit list. The same kind that Darren's had been. The same kind Amanda had found before she vanished. I looked up at him, my voice unsteady. Who put me on this list? Darren hesitated. Then he muttered two words that shattered me. Your wife. I froze. Eleanor cursed under her breath. I shook my head. That's not possible. Darren looked me dead in the eye. Isn't it? And just like that, everything I thought I knew was a lie. Part 79. The betrayal runs deep. The cabin felt colder. The walls seemed closer. I could hear my own breathing, heavy and uneven. You're lying, I finally said, my voice sharp. Darren didn't flinch. I wish I was. Eleanor stepped closer. If this is true, you need to start explaining now. Darren nodded slowly. He reached into his coat and pulled out a second piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully and placed it on the table. It was an email from an anonymous sender, but the recipient, Jessica Parker, my wife. And right there, in the middle of the email, was a single phrase that made my stomach drop. Ensure Ethan is handled before the 15th. Part 80. The deadline approaches. I clenched my jaw. Before the 15th? Darren sighed. It's the same timeline Amanda was working on before she disappeared. Eleanor looked at me, then Darren. We're 4 days away from the 15th. Darren nodded grimly. That means whatever's coming? It's happening soon. I exhaled sharply, my mind racing. Jessica had been working against me. For how long? Why? And more importantly, was she planning on killing me? I turned back to Darren. Do you have proof that she sent this? Darren hesitated. Not directly, but her name is tied to every account connected to this. My hands balled into fists. Jessica wasn't just keeping secrets. She was orchestrating something. And now, I had 4 days to figure out what. Part 81. The last call. I needed answers. Now, I pulled out my phone and dialed Jessica. It rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was soft, calm. Ethan? I swallowed hard. Where are you? A pause. Then home. Where else would I be? I took a breath. I had to play this carefully. I need to see you. She hesitated. Is something wrong? I forced a small laugh. No. Just, I want to talk. Another pause. Then, okay. I'll be here. I hung up and turned to Darren. I need to see her alone. Eleanor tensed. That's a bad idea. Darren nodded. If she knows we're onto her, she'll disappear before you get anything. I shook my head. I won't let her slip away. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Because if Jessica had been lying to me this whole time, I was about to find out. Part 82. Face to face with the truth. I pulled into the driveway, my hands gripping the wheel. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the living room. I stepped inside. Jessica was waiting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. She smiled. Hey, babe. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Hey. I sat across from her, forcing myself to stay calm. Jessica tilted her head. You look tense. I exhaled slowly. Jessica? Are you keeping anything from me? Her smile faltered just for a second. Then she laughed softly. Ethan, what's this about? I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. The email was on the screen. Jessica's face drained of color. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the phone, scanning the words. She looked up at me, and in her eyes, I saw fear. Not confusion, not anger, fear. And that's when I knew it was true. She had betrayed me. And now? She was about to explain why. Part 83. The Confession. Jessica set the phone down slowly. Her lips parted like she was searching for words. Then, she whispered, "I can explain." I leaned forward. "Then start talking." She hesitated. Then, "I never wanted you to find out like this." I clenched my jaw. "Find out what, Jessica?" She swallowed hard. "That you were never supposed to survive." The room went silent. Every nerve in my body went rigid. Never supposed to survive? I forced my voice to stay even. "What does that mean?" Jessica exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. "Ethan, there are things you don't know. Things I never wanted you to know." I stared at her. And then, she told me everything. Part 84. The Final Truth. Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. "You were supposed to die 2 years ago." My blood turned to ice. "What?" She nodded. "The accident. The one you walked away from. That wasn't an accident." I sucked in a sharp breath. "My car crash. The one that nearly killed me. The one that never made sense." Jessica's hands shook. "They were supposed to finish the job. But you lived. And when you did, I had to find another way. I felt like I was drowning. Jessica, my wife, had been trying to kill me. For 2 years. And I had never seen it. Until now." Part 85. The Endgame. I stood up slowly. Jessica didn't move. She knew. She had lost. I knew everything now. I pulled out my phone and hit dial. She flinched. "Who are you calling?" I held her gaze. "The police." Jessica's eyes widened. For the first time, she looked truly terrified. She bolted toward the door. I lunged. But I was too late. The front door slammed shut. And just like that, Jessica was gone. Part 86. The final chase begins. Jessica is running. Ethan knows the truth. But she won't go down quietly. Now, it's a race against time. Before she disappears forever. Will Ethan catch her before she escapes? Or is this just the beginning of something even darker? Like this video if you think Jessica has one last trick up her sleeve. Comment below, what do you think Ethan should do next?